So in the last video, we saw how we can sort objects if we have a class that we implemented and we want this class to be sortable, so our objects are sortable. All we do is we come to our class and we say we're going to implement the comparable interface so that we tell you how to compare the objects, how we want our objects to be compared, so that I can, they can be sortable by first name or banner ID or GPA, however I want my classes and objects to be sorted. Now, what if you want to sort an object and this object was not written by you, and so it doesn't implement the comparable interface? So I want to sort the students, and the students was written by someone else, and they never implemented the comparable interface. How can I sort these objects if they're not implementing the comparable interface? Okay, another question that might come to you or we might run into is, what if the student class is sorting itself by name, but I want to be able to sort them by banner ID. I want to sort them by something else. I don't want to sort them by what they're sorting by. In that case, we can't use the comparable interface. But the nice thing is that there's another interface that we can use, which is called the comparator interface, the comparator interface. And the comparator interface is one that's similar to comparable, except it requires you to implement a method called compare. Again, it's called compare, returns an int, but this time the method actually takes 2 arguments. It doesn't take 1 argument. This is similar to when we were using the integer dot compare or a double dot compare. So this is very similar to in the last slide here when it's calling double dot compare. So actually, this compare method is not part of a comparable interface. It is part of the comparator interface that we're going to learn about. And again, this method, what it does, it returns 0 if they're the same, if they're equal. It returns a positive number if A is bigger. It returns a negative number if A is smaller. Okay, let's see an example of how to do that. What we basically need to do is implement a class, okay, and make it implement the comparator interface. Now, you can write your own class, or you can actually just modify your class to implement comparator. And I'm going to show you both ways of doing it, okay? So the first thing is just modify my class, because that is a little easier. So I'm going to go to my class. Oops. And I'm going to say I want my student class to be implementing tour. And this time I'm just going to say student so I don't have to do the casting. And do I have a spelling mistake? Comparator. Comparator. Let's see if I need to import it. So I just had to import it. And now it's telling me student does not override the method compare that takes 2 students. So I need to modify that, implement that method. So I'm going to go and say public int compare, and it takes 2 students, A and student B. And now I have to decide how I want to sort them. So here we were sorting on the social security number. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to sort by name. So I'm going to say return A dot compare A dot name dot compare to B dot name dot name. That's it. I'm going to go to A, get its name, go to the first student, get its name, and say compare yourself name to B's name. And so now it's comparing the names. And that's the first thing we do. So we said we're going to implement the comparator. So we had to implement this compare method, which takes 2 students. And then the next thing is that in my chapter 10, in my main, so here let's just print a message that says system.out. This is sorting by the comparable, which is doing social security number. Okay. And what I want to do now is I want to sort by the comparable. I want to sort now by comparator, which is sorting by the name. Okay. So I'm going to go to arrays dot sort, and notice, let's do it again, arrays dot sort. Notice that the sort methods, it takes all these different kinds of arrays, and then here it takes the array in addition to a comparator object. So it needs an object that's a comparator object. And what you do is you just basically create a new instance of your object, your class. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new student here, because that's the class that I added to, the comparator interface to. So I want to sort my students, and I'm just going to say new student. And now let's see if it's going to work. So here we sorted by social security number. It's 1, 2, 6, 7. And then here I'm sorting by the name, the comparator, the name, and so it got sorted by name: apple, cat, frog, and zebra. Okay, so if you want to provide functionality so that you're comparable with two things, you can implement the comparable and comparator interface like I did. Now, we said the reason really you want to implement comparator is that we are trying to sort an object that doesn't implement the comparable interface, or we don't have access to it like I just did. So in that case, I wouldn't be able to just implement it in the student class. I would have to create a new class.